Hey, what's happening, everybody? Today we're going to do lab exercise 7, Excel pivot tables part 1. So, pivot tables are special tools in Excel that allow you to really simplify digging into large blocks of data. So, what we're going to do to start, I have a file here with a whole bunch of data, right? Like a couple hundred invoice records, things from different vendors, whether they've been paid, not been paid, what the dates are, all that. And I'm going to show how it works if we didn't have pivot tables. And then I'm going to introduce the concept of pivot tables, and we'll do a few exercises with that. Okay, so if you haven't already, go to Blackboard, download the file. LX7, it says LX7 demo in the exercise, but it's actually listed as LX7 and 8 demo. And it has a bunch of business data, 200 invoices with fields for vendors and so on. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is get a sum. This PDF is a little foobar here. Okay, first thing we're going to do is get a sum of all the accounts from all the invoices. So if we wanted to do that, that's pretty easy to do. We just go to H2 here. We're arbitrarily picking that cell, and we're going to do total amount. Okay, and in cell H3, we're going to do equals sum of C2 to C201. If you want to write that in, you can, or you can just click on C2 and do Control Shift down to select the whole column. Okay, either way, you get that whole number, 60,000 and change. Great. So that's an easy one to do. All right, but let's look at something a little bit more involved. Suppose we want the sum of all amounts from a particular vendor, say Trilogy, which is one of them here. Let's see, there's a Trilogy record. Okay, so one thing you could do is you could create a separate column holding all of the invoices from Trilogy. For example, you could say column G here, you do some kind of if function in Excel and say, if the vendor is Trilogy, put a number there and then add up that column, right? That would certainly be one way to do it, okay? But you can do what's called a sum if function, which is a simpler way, right? Worth knowing. So let's do this. We're gonna, in H5, put the label total amounts for Trilogy. And then below that, we're gonna use the sum if function. So sum if function is easy to understand, equals sum if, and what we're gonna do is look over a particular range, B2 to B201, and if the text in it is Trilogy, so we put that in quotes, so quote equals Trilogy, whoop, okay, and close out the quotes, and C2 to C201. So for every entry in the B column, if it turns out that the name is Trilogy, we're going to add or include the value from C, right? So here it's going to look, see in B12, say, oh, this one's Trilogy, then it includes the number from C12. So if we add all those, ta-da, we get about a little less than 12,000. Okay. Anyway, so this is manageable. If we wanted to just extract that, yeah, that's fine. Okay, but suppose we wanted something even a little bit more complicated than that. I'm going to change the format here so it's at least consistent. Okay, now suppose you want to do a more complicated one where the vendor is Trilogy, the month is February 2017, and we only want to look at unpaid ones. Oof. Okay, so this is something that you don't really want to have to do on your own, but we could do it in cell H8, enter the text, total unpaid amounts for Trilogy, February 2017. Okay, and this monstrous function we would have to enter in cell H9 would be equals sum ifs C2 to C201, B2 to B201 equals Trilogy, D2 to D201 greater than or equal to don't forget that quote, ampersand date 2017 2 comma 1 comma D2 to D201 less than or equal to ampersand date 2017 comma 2 comma 28 comma, oh, close out the parentheses, right? We got that. E2 to E201 comma equals no. And if we typed all that in correctly, right, what we're doing is we're taking these numbers from column C based on the criteria in these other fields. So if the vendor is Trilogy, and if the date in column D is at least February 1st, 2017, and if the date in column D is no greater than February 28th, and if the value from E is no, right? So we can do this, and you can even understand how it works. Let's hit enter. Good, we get the total 551. This will come back, remember this number. The point is, right? The point is this formula is kind of a beast, and it's easy to make mistakes, and you don't want to do this a whole bunch of times if you don't have to. So the wonderful thing about pivot tables is you can do calculations like this. You can extract fairly, deep subsets of data, and it's not too painful, right? And it's a lot harder to make mistakes. So we're going to make a pivot table to do all the same stuff. So go ahead, click in cell A1. We're going to just make sure we're clicked in the right spot and go to Insert and Pivot Table. And just go with the default options. It's going to create a pivot table in a new worksheet, which is what we want. Okay. So boom, there we have it. Opens automatically. Now in the range on the right, so over here in this panel on the right, we're going to select a couple things. First of all, checkbox for vendor, ta-da, and then the checkbox for amount. Okay, and here, this is the same picture in the lab manual. We have a list of vendors and their total amount. So this is all we have. In Trilogy, once again, we see, a little bit under 12,000 and the grand total a little bit over 60,000. So fine. Now, suppose we wanted, right, if we wanted to look at sum of all invoice amounts, right, our 60,000, boom, that's automatically displayed. We have the sum of all of our individual vendors, and we have the sum of all the vendors, right? And again, same thing, if we just wanted to look at Trilogy, by including vendor as a row, this sum total is automatically broken up into the sum, into all the individual vendor sums. So what we're doing with a pivot table, essentially, we have a large pile of data and we can break it into segments. So in this case, our large pile of data we're looking at is all of the invoice amounts, and then we're breaking that up according to which vendor is the source of the invoice. Okay, so sorry, I gotta refresh this. The images aren't always displaying correctly. This is very strange. Okay, so excuse me. We're going to do a couple things. We're going to uncheck these. Okay, so uncheck these boxes. I'm going to demo the fact that sequence is important. So suppose we start off with vendor, then date received. Okay, we click vendor, ta-da, and then we click date received. Let's drag that down to columns. Yeah, and it does this strange thing where it clicks date and months automatically. Let's exclude that. Okay, if we do that, then we see that vendors are the rows, and then the individual columns are all the different dates on which something happened, okay? If we do it the other way around, if we do date received and drag that down to the rows, and once again, unclick these days and months, and we drag vendor down to columns, then we can change the layout. So in this case, the rows are the dates on which something happened, and when something happened for a particular vendor, we'll have an entry of it in here. In this case, we don't have very many, because we haven't included an amount yet, right? If we wanted to include an amount, we'd certainly do that. And now we have the individual invoice numbers for each day and each vendor. All right, so let's unclick all those. We'll bring it back to our original state. Okay. So we're going to do this, right? Vendor to rows, date received to columns, and then amount to values. So vendor to rows, that means, hey, each row is going to have data on a particular vendor. Column, right? Column, we're going to have date received. So on any date where an invoice was received, boom, we're going to have a record for that. So unclick days and months. We don't really need those. Okay, we have all these individual days. And if we want, we could drag amount down to values, and boom. And now for every day, we can see, oh, here, New Year's Day, there was an invoice from Fishbowl and an invoice from Partzilla. Day after, there was one from Aligny, I don't know, it's Italian, Aligny, and another one on the day following that, and then one from Partzilla on the 4th, and so on. Okay, so that's it. And if you scroll all the way down to the end, grab down here, scroll all the way down to the end, you can in fact see that there is a column with all the totals for all the individual vendors. So once again, it's breaking up these totals into all of its component pieces. Okay, So let's unclick all these. We'll bring it back to our original situation once again and scroll back. Okay. So we're going to filter out some data, right? So what we want to do was we're going to exclude vendors that are not Trilogy, dates that are outside February 2017, and any invoices that have already been paid. Okay, so I'm going to do this thing again. We're going to put in vendor in the rows. We're going to do date received in the columns and unclick these days and months. Okay. Now, first thing we're going to do in the row labels A4, right? There's a little down arrow here. We're going to click on that, and we have the select all option down here. So here we can unclick everyone, and then we're just going to include Trilogy. Ta-da, there it is. Okay, so now we only see results for Trilogy. That's fine. We're supposed to include, I guess we're supposed to include the amounts. I'll drag those down. So that's fine. We only see the values for Trilogy now. Okay, now for the dates, we want to do another similar thing, right? So click on the down arrow by column labels, B3, right? So right here, and there is a date filters option, right? So this is the, in an older version, like in, let's list it here, it said sort and filter, but now we just jump to straight to date filters, and we're going to select the between, okay? And we're going to just type it in, 2/1/2017 and 2/28/2017. You could use the calendars, but it's a little awkward considering how many years are involved. So, and just hit OK, boom. And now we see this, right? Now this just shows the total amounts, right? It doesn't show which have been paid, which haven't paid. Well, in order to do that, let's include paid. So you can click on that and it drops into the rows, right? Now, and automatically, by doing that, we have it broken up into no and yes. So remember back when we had this same function that showed $551 worth of unpaid invoices from Trilogy. Well, guess what? If we go back to sheet 1 here, hey, there's that same number. Okay, but pivot tables are a lot easier of a way to do it, right? We can just drag these column and row groupings and our sum groupings and get the results we want. We don't have to mess around with these super complicated Excel functions. Okay, that's it for today. We'll come back next week and we'll do Excel pivot tables part 2. All right, thanks for your attention. See you next time.